Once upon a time, there were 3 billy goats that belonged to a widow and her son Jack. But these billy goats were not confined to their compound. They were allowed to wander free, unlike their friend Milky White the cow that was always tied to the shed. Milky White was not allowed to wander off alone because Milky White, unlike the 3 goats, produced milk. So the 3 goats wandered out of the compound from time to time. They seldom stayed as a herd. They were of different sizes, but they all shared the same name, Gruff. They were always eating anything they could find when they wandered on their own. One day, the smallest goat wandered to a small deserted bridge made of stone which was built over a small stream. Although the stream was small, it had plenty of fish, which attracted bears. But that day, there were no bears to be seen. So the goat decided to cross the bridge. But what the goat did not know was, under the bridge, there was a troll lurking. It had eyes as big as saucers, purple hair that stood up, sharp teeth, long fingernails, and a big, long, crooked nose. The goat walked on the bridge.
"Who's that tripping over my bridge?"
A shrill voice came from under the bridge. The goat, not knowing any better, said,
"Oh, it is only I, the tiniest billy goat Gruff. Don't mind me. I'm going up to the hillside. I hear there's a lot to eat there,"
said the billy goat.
"No, you're not!"
shouted the troll, and with that, he jumped from under the bridge and caught the goat. He immediately put it in a sack. The cries of the goat attracted his elder brother, who was not so far away. So a little while after came the second billy goat Gruff. He could hear the faint cries of his younger brother, but did not know where he was, as the cries were coming from under the bridge. He then made his way on the bridge.
"Who's that tripping on my bridge?"
asked the troll once again.
"Oh, it is I, the second billy goat Gruff, and I'm looking for my younger brother."
The troll jumped on the bridge again, this time with a bigger sack, and caught the second billy goat.
"I'll take you to your brother,"
the troll said with an evil laugh. The third, eldest, and biggest billy goat Gruff heard the cries of his brother, and he came running up the bridge.
"This is my lucky day,"
thought the troll to himself.
"I promised the giant ogre that lives above the clouds that I'd bring him 3 goats, and looks like I'm going to keep my promise."
With that, the troll jumped on the bridge with the 2 sacks of the other goats on his back.
"Ah, what do we have here? A bigger goat, I see. And what is your name?"
asked the troll.
"It's Big Billy Goat Gruff,"
said the goat angrily.
"Yeah, whatever. Look, you can make it easy for the 2 of us. I can grab you and put you in the sack just like I did with your brothers, or you could come along quietly. The choice is yours. And quit staring at me like that."
Big Billy Goat Gruff gave a loud war cry.
"Go for it, troll. I've got 2 horns. And when I butt you, you'll be sorry that you were born. I'll crush your bones on this bridge made of stone."
"Oh, yeah?
responded the troll.
Before you could butt me, I'll bite you."
But before the troll could finish his sentence, Big Billy Goat Gruff charged at him and gave him a hard butt that sent him flying across the trees and forest even. Unfortunately, the troll was still holding on to the sacks of the other 2 billy goats. Big Billy Goat Gruff hoped that they would escape and maybe one day they would end up together. But till then, Big Billy Goat Gruff wandered alone.
Jack and the Beanstalk. Once upon a time, there lived a poor widow who had an only son named Jack. They owned a cow named Milky White and 3 goats that wandered away from home from time to time. Jack and his mother had to live on the milk the cow gave, which Jack carried to the market and sold.
Fresh milk! Fresh milk! Get your fresh milk here!
Jack would call out every morning at the market. But Milky White was getting old, and one morning she gave no more milk. Jack and his mother didn't know what to do.
How will we manage?
Said Jack's mother, wringing her hands.
Don't worry, Mother. I'll go and get work somewhere,
said Jack.
I could work as a woodcutter.
You've tried that before, and nobody would take you. You're still too young,
said his mother.
I'm older now. I'm already a teenager. You've seen me cut firewood. I'm strong,
argued Jack.
Yes, I know you are,
replied Jack's mother.
But the woodcutters still consider you too young to do a man's work. There's no choice. We must sell Milky White. With the money, perhaps, we could start a shop.
All right, Mother,
said Jack.
It's market day today. I'll try and sell Milky White and get a good price for her.
So off to the market Jack went, leading the cow by a halter. He hadn't gone far when he met a man with an old dog by his side.
Good morning, Jack. How are you?
Good morning, sir. I'm fine, thank you,
answered Jack, wondering how the stranger knew his name.
I see you're walking your pet. This is Rufus,
said the man, pointing to the dog.
What's your pet's name?
Milky White,
replied Jack.
Why do you look so sad, Jack?
asked the man.
Well,
sighed Jack,
I'm going to the market to try and sell Milky White.
Said the man, thoughtfully scratching his chin.
I tell you what, Jack, I'll swap my magic beans for your cow. That way, you'd know she wouldn't be butchered. I'll take good care of Milky White.
Magic beans?
The boy's eyes gleamed, but he tried not to show his excitement.
There's no such thing as magic beans,
scoffed Jack. Ah, you don't know what these magic beans could do, said the man. Plant them overnight. By morning, they'll grow right up to the sky.
Really?
asked Jack.
I don't believe you. You're trying to trick me,
said Jack.
Well, if it's not true, I'll give you back your cow. Would that be fair?
asked the man.
I guess so,
said Jack. He handed over Milky White's halter and pocketed the handful of beans.
Back so soon, Jack?
asked his mother.
I hope you got a good price for Milky White.
You'll never guess, Mother,
said Jack nervously.
5 pieces of gold? 10? 15? It couldn't be 20.
I traded her for a handful of these magic beans. If we plant them overnight, they'll grow until they reach the sky. The man said.
What a fool you have been!
Screamed Jack's mother.
How could you give away Milky White for some magic beans? She used to be a fine milk cow. Give me that rubbish.
She grabbed the beans from Jack's hands and threw them out of the window.
Off to bed. There'll be no dinner for you tonight.
So Jack went upstairs to his little room in the attic, where he cried himself to sleep. When Jack woke in the morning, his room seemed odd. The sun was shining into part of it, yet the rest of it was quite dark and shady. Jack jumped up, got dressed, went to the window to look out. The beans his mother had thrown out of the window had sprung up into a tall beanstalk, which went up and up until it reached the sky. Jack opened his window and jumped onto the beanstalk. It grew just like a big ladder and disappeared up into the clouds. Jack climbed and 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 climbed till at last he reached the top of the beanstalk. Way up among the clouds, he saw a long road which led straight to a house. It looked quite an ordinary house from where he was standing. Jack was curious, so he walked towards the house, and as he drew closer to it, it seemed to get bigger and bigger. When he reached the doorstep of the house, he realized it was huge. There was a great tall woman standing at the door.
Good morning, ma'am,
said Jack politely.
Could you spare some food for me for breakfast? I haven't had anything to eat since last night, and I'm starving.
Breakfast? Is that what you want?
Said the great big woman.
Well, you'll be breakfast if you don't get away from here. My husband is a big ogre. His brother's a shapeshifter and lives in a castle down on the earth. I'm sure you heard of him. My husband is furious because he heard rumors that his brother was gobbled up by a cat, who tricked him into turning himself into a mouse. My husband likes nothing better than boys broiled on toast. You better be moving along now. He'll be coming home any time now.
Oh, please give me something to eat,
begged Jack, his hunger getting the better of him. The ogre's wife felt sorry for the boy. Taking Jack into the kitchen, she gave him some bread and cheese and a glass of milk. Jack was halfway through his breakfast when he heard loud thumping footsteps.
Oh, my goodness gracious me! It's my husband,
said the ogre's wife.
Quickly, boy, jump into the oven and hide there.
And she bundled Jack into the oven just as the ogre entered the kitchen. The ogre was very, very big. His teeth were dirty. He had a big, tangled beard and his hair was unkempt. At his belt were 2 goats strung up by the heels. He unhooked them, threw them down on the table, and told his wife,
Here, cut these up and broil them for me for breakfast. The troll promised me that he would give me 3 goats, but in the end, he only had 2. Hey, what's that I smell? Fee-fi-fo-fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll have his bones to grind my bread.
Nonsense, dear,
said his wife.
It's just the smell of the scruffy goats that you just brought in. Why don't you go and wash up? By the time you come back, your breakfast will be ready.
Wash up? Whatever for?
Asked the ogre.
I had a wash last month.
Just go and do it, dear. You will feel better,
said his wife. So off the giant ogre went. Jack was climbing out of the oven to run away when the woman stopped him.
Wait till he's asleep, boy,
she said.
He always takes a nap after breakfast.
And sure enough, after he had his breakfast, he went to a big chest, took out a couple of bags of gold. He sat in his giant chair at his giant table and began to count his gold coins. Very soon, the ogre began to nod off. His eyes crossed, trying to fight sleep, but soon his eyelids grew too heavy to keep open. He fell asleep and began to snore, making the whole house shake and rattle. Jack crept out from the oven and began to tiptoe past the sleeping ogre. The ogre's wife called out to him.
Psst! Boy, here, take a bag of gold with you. Won't your husband be very angry when he finds out?
Asked Jack.
Don't worry. He's very forgetful after his nap.
Jack took one of the bags of gold, placed it under his arm, and staggered off under the load. When he arrived at the Beanstalk, he just dropped the bag of gold, which fell into his mother's garden. Then he climbed down and 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 down until he got on solid ground. He hurried to tell his mother about his adventure. He also showed her the gold and said,
Wasn't I right about the beans? They really were magical.
Jack and his mother lived on the bag of gold for some time, but at last they came to the end of it. Jack decided to try his luck once more at the top of the Beanstalk. One fine morning, as the sun was rising, he started to climb up the Beanstalk. He climbed and 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 he climbed till at last he found himself at the top. Then he followed the wide road that led to the great house where the ogre lived. There, standing at the doorstep, was the ogre's tall wife.
Good morning again, ma'am,
said Jack with a charming smile.
You're not here begging for something to eat again, are you, boy? The last time, I let you get away with a bag of gold. What do you want this time? Away with you, before my husband appears.
I just want to thank you for your hospitality and to give you some important news.
Well, you've thanked me, so go away now. If my husband gets home, he'll gobble you up.
But I have something important to tell you. Please, let me come in.
The ogre's wife was very curious, so she allowed him into her kitchen.
Now what is it that's so important?
She asked. Jack, meanwhile, was racking his brains, stalling for time and trying to think of something important to say.
Before I start, could I have something to eat? It was a long climb up the Beanstalk.
The ogre's wife gave him some bread and cheese and waited impatiently for him to finish his meal so that she could hear his important message. Before he could finish what was on his plate, Jack heard the giant ogre's footsteps approaching.
Oh no, my husband's home! Quickly, boy, climb into the oven.
When the ogre walked in, he started sniffing the air.
Fee-fi-fo-fum! I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll have his bones to grind my bread.
Don't be silly. You're just smelling the lamb chops I'm having. I'll get you some if you want,
the ogre's wife said to him. After 5 servings of lamb chops, he told his wife,
Bring me the hen that lays golden eggs.
When she brought the hen to him, the ogre told the hen,
Lay!
And the hen laid an egg made of solid gold. The ogre was pleased and nodded with satisfaction.
Now, bring me my golden harp,
the ogre ordered his wife. She did as she was told. The golden harp was a magical harp, and it began to play a soothing tune, which made the ogre start to feel drowsy. Listening to the music from the harp, his eyelids drooped. The ogre fell asleep and began to snore till the whole house shook. The music that the harp produced was so soothing it even put the ogre's wife to sleep. Jack took the opportunity to climb out of the oven. He crept over to the table, caught hold of the hen that laid golden eggs. With his other hand, he grabbed the harp. Jack was almost out of the room when the hen gave a loud cackle and the harp stopped playing. As soon as the music stopped, the giant ogre woke up, grunting noisily at having his sleep interrupted. Jack ran for his life, leaving the door open behind him. As he ran, he could hear the ogre shouting,
Come back with my hen and harp, boy! When I catch you, I'll make a delicious broth out of you!
Jack ran as fast as he could. The image of being boiled in a pot made his feet barely touch the ground. The ogre was very close to catching Jack. But Jack dodged him, got to the beanstalk, and started climbing for his life. It seemed to the ogre that Jack had disappeared before his eyes. Then he looked down and saw Jack climbing quickly down the beanstalk. The ogre swung himself onto the beanstalk and started climbing after Jack. But he was clumsy and slow, and the beanstalk trembled and shook under his great weight. Jack climbed down and 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 down. And when he was close to reaching the ground, he called out at the top of his voice,
Mother, quickly, bring me a sharp axe.
Thinking Jack was being attacked by a hungry wolf, his mother rushed out with the axe. She saw Jack climbing down the beanstalk with a hen tucked in his shirt front and a harp slung on his back. Jack hurriedly handed the hen and harp to his mother and grabbed the sharp axe. The ogre was still high up on the beanstalk, with quite a ways to climb down. Jack began to chop frantically at the base of the beanstalk. He swung so hard that on his third swing, he almost cut the beanstalk into two. The ogre was terrified to feel the beanstalk begin to shake and quiver beneath him. Instead of climbing down, he started to climb upwards as fast as he could. When the beanstalk came tumbling down, the ogre was nowhere to be seen. He had escaped the fall by climbing back into the clouds where he belonged. Jack and his mother became very rich because they had an unlimited supply of golden eggs. People came from far and wide and paid to listen to the soothing sounds the magical harp produced. The ogre was never seen or heard again.
Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Once upon a time, deep in the forest lived 3 bears: Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and Baby Bear. Papa Bear was huge. Mama Bear was pretty big too. And Baby Bear, well, Baby Bear was just so cute and huggable. Mama Bear cooked some porridge with fish that Papa Bear had caught fishing by the lake. The porridge was piping hot, so Mama Bear poured it into bowls to cool. One for Baby Bear, one for herself, and a really big bowl of porridge for Papa Bear. Baby Bear liked his porridge with honey, so Mama Bear poured a generous amount into Baby Bear's bowl. Papa Bear liked his porridge plain. For herself, Mama Bear added a generous amount of sliced cucumber into her porridge. The porridge was still too hot to eat. Papa Bear had an idea.
Why don't we take a walk in the woods?
He suggested.
By the time we come back, the porridge should be just nice.
Mama Bear and Papa Bear thought a walk was a good idea, since it was a nice day outside. So the 3 bears went for a walk in the forest. Meanwhile, a little girl named Goldilocks came wandering along. She had curly, shoulder-length golden blonde hair, hence her name, Goldilocks. She had been walking for a long time and was hungry and very tired. When she came upon the cottage that belonged to the 3 bears, she knocked. But no one was home, and the door was locked. Goldilocks went around to the back of the cottage and looked in through the kitchen window. she saw 3 bowls of porridge sitting on the counter. The smell was so good that she climbed in through the window and began to help herself to the porridge. First, she tried a taste from Papa Bear's bowl. "It's too hot," she said to herself, and went on to try Mama Bear's porridge. She found it too cold, and she found slices of cucumber in it. Too strange. When she tried Baby Bear's porridge, it tasted just right. Maybe it was the honey that did the trick. This porridge is just right. It's not too hot and not too cold," she said happily. It tasted so good, she finished all of it. Goldilocks was a curious little girl, and after she'd had the porridge, she started to explore the cottage. She saw 3 chairs in the living room. Goldilocks climbed into the first chair, a really big one, which belonged to Papa Bear. "This chair is too big and too hard," she said to herself. Next, she tried Mama Bear's chair. "This chair is too big as well, and it's way too soft," she declared. Finally, she sat in the last and smallest chair, closest to the fireplace. "This chair is just right. It's a little small, but it's very comfortable, and nice and warm too," she sighed. But just as she settled into the chair, it started to creak and groan and ended up breaking into pieces. "Oh well," she said, "I guess the chair is just good for firewood now." Goldilocks was very tired by this time, so she climbed up the stairs to the bedroom. She lay down on Papa Bear's bed, the first one she came to. Too hard. Then she tried the second bed, which was Mama Bear's, but found it too soft. She found herself sinking into the mattress. Then, at the corner of the room, she spotted a third bed, and this one looked just the right size. It wasn't too big or too hard or too soft. She climbed into Baby Bear's bed, snuggled down under the covers, gave a huge yawn, and fell asleep. Goldilocks was sound asleep when the 3 bears came home. Baby Bear was very hungry and ran straight to the kitchen with Mama Bear right behind him. Papa Bear was the last one to enter the cottage. He made sure that he locked the door behind him. "Mama!" cried Baby Bear. Mama Bear went over to him and was surprised to notice that someone had been eating their porridge. "Papa Bear, come quickly!" cried out Mama Bear. Papa Bear went running into the kitchen.
Someone's been eating my porridge,
growled Papa Bear. "My bowl still has a spoon in it. Someone's been trying my porridge as well," said Mama Bear. "Look at my bowl. Someone's been eating my porridge, and they finished it all up," cried Baby Bear.
We must get to the bottom of this. Maybe this intruder is still in the house. Let's check the living room,
said Papa Bear. When the 3 bears got to the living room, there was more evidence of an intruder.
Someone's been sitting in my chair,
growled Papa Bear. Someone's been sitting in my chair as well, said Mama Bear. Someone's been sitting in my chair, and they've broken it all to pieces, cried poor Baby Bear.
There could be more than just one someone. Maybe there are 3,
growled Papa Bear. And maybe they're upstairs, whispered Mama Bear.
Then let's go and look for them,
said Papa Bear, who was very angry. Papa, be careful, cried Baby Bear.
We're bears. We're not afraid of anything,
said Papa Bear. But, said Baby Bear. Your papa is right, my little bear, said Mama Bear, hushing Baby Bear. The 3 bears went quietly up the stairs to the bedroom. Goldilocks was fast asleep. She never heard a sound, not even when Papa Bear growled.
Someone's been sleeping in my bed.
Someone's been sleeping in my bed too, said Mama Bear. Mama, Papa, someone's been sleeping in my bed, and she's still there, exclaimed Baby Bear.
What?
said Papa Bear, and his loud, angry growl woke Goldilocks up. She opened her eyes to see 3 angry bears looming over her. Help! She screamed. Bears! Goldilocks scrambled out of bed and ran down the stairs. She left the cottage the same way she came in, by climbing through the kitchen window. She ran away into the forest as fast as she could, and she never returned to the home of the three bears.
Once upon a time, there lived a miller and his 3 sons. The miller fell sick one day and died suddenly. In his will, the miller left the mill to the eldest son, his donkey to the second son. For his youngest son, there was nothing left but the pet cat named Puss. The eldest son and the second son were quite happy with what they'd inherited, but the youngest wasn't.
What am I gonna do with a cat?
He thought aloud.
Maybe I could sell the cat to some old lady as a pet. Nah, that wouldn't work. The only old lady I know lives at the other end of the forest. She's sick. She can't even take care of herself. Looks like I'm gonna starve.
Hearing that, the cat walked up to his young master, rubbing its fur against his leg, before standing up on its hind legs.
Real good master. Don't be sad. If you just get me a pair of boots to wear and a large bag with a drawstring, I'll make your living for you. Real.
The young master was amazed. The cat could speak and stand upright on 2 legs. This was no ordinary cat, he realized, but a wise and clever one.
I'll get you your boots and a bag and a drawstring,
he said to the cat. As soon as the cat had his boots and his bag, he hurried into the nearby forest. Puss in Boots placed some fresh and tasty carrots and cabbage into his bag and left it open. He then lay down and pretended to be asleep. In a little while, a fat rabbit came hopping by and hopped into it. Puss in Boots quickly leapt up and pulled the bag's drawstring tight, capturing the greedy rabbit. He then made his way to the royal palace and asked to see the king. When he came before the king, Puss in Boots bowed low and said,
Meow. Your Majesty, I have here a fine fat rabbit which has been sent to you by my lord.
And who is your lord, Puss in Boots?
asked the king.
Meow. He is the Marquis of Carabas,
smiled Puss behind his whiskers. What a noble, high-sounding name he had just made up for his young master. The king thanked Puss in Boots, pleased, because the rabbit was indeed a fine one. Puss bowed and left the castle. The next day, he had another idea. He filled his trusty bag with a handful of grain. Again, he left it open, then lay down and pretended to nap. There were a flock of birds flying around, and one plump partridge flew down to see what the bag offered. Spotting the tasty grain within the open bag, it ventured inside. Now, in an instant, Puss in Boots drew the string of the bag tight, and the partridge was caught. Now, as he did before, Puss in Boots went to the castle and politely asked to see the king. When he was granted an audience, he bowed low and announced,
Meow. Your Majesty, here is another gift from my lord, the Marquis of Carabas. He has many of these fine rare birds on his land. Meow.
Though he had never heard the name before, the king was pleased with the gift. He had inquired of his courtiers, but no one else knew of the Marquis of Carabas either. It wasn't surprising, because Puss in Boots made it up. Not wanting to seem ignorant, no one in the king's court dared to admit they'd never heard of the Marquis of Carabas. Puss in Boots continued to bring gifts to the king daily. The king began to speculate to himself.
This Marquis of Carabas, seems to be a rich and generous young man.
Now one day, the king announced that he would be taking his daughter for a carriage ride along the river. The princess was very beautiful, and he was hoping to marry her off to a noble gentleman. When Puss in Boots heard about the king's outing, he ran up to his master and said,
Meow. Good master, please listen to me. Follow my directions carefully, as I think your fortune is just around the corner. Meow.
He then confessed to his master everything he had done, and told him that the king knew him as the Marquis of Carabas. He then instructed his master to swim naked in the river. The young man didn't see any sense in it, but he decided it couldn't hurt to follow instructions from his clever Puss in Boots. While the young man was swimming, Puss disposed of his shabby clothes. Soon, they heard the king's carriage approaching. When the carriage drew closer, Puss in Boots ran out to it, crying,
Help! Help! Somebody help me, please! My master, the Marquis of Carabas, is drowning!
Now the king recognized Puss in Boots and ordered his carriage to stop.
Quickly, guards! Save the Marquis of Carabas!
Puss in Boots bowed, head humbly, and said,
Your Majesty, I am embarrassed on my master's behalf. 'Cause while he was swimming, thieves made away with his fine clothes.
Now on hearing that, the king insisted on providing the young man with clothes befitting his rank. Dressed in fine clothing, the miller's son appeared more handsome than before, and the princess fell in love with him. The king then invited the young man to share his carriage and introduced him to his daughter.
Daughter, this is the Marquis of Carabas,
the king said. Now meanwhile, Puss in Boots had run ahead of the carriage and was soon out of sight. He came across some reapers in a grain field, and running up to them, he called out,
Listen, the royal coach is coming this way. And if the king asks you who owns these fields, tell him, the Marquis of Carabas. If you fail to do this, I promise you will be ground into mincemeat.
The terrified reapers quickly agreed. When the king approached the fields, he called out from his carriage,
Who is the owner of these fields?
Now the reapers bowed deeply and answered,
The Marquis of Carabas, Your Majesty.
The Marquis of Carabas, Your Majesty.
I am most impressed with these fine fields,
he said to the miller's son. Puss in Boots ran on ahead, and soon he came across some men who were mowing hay in a meadow. He ran up to them, and as he had instructed the reapers, he told them,
Now listen up! The royal carriage is coming this way. When the king asks you who owns these fields, see that you answer, the Marquis of Carabas. Refuse, and you will be ground into mincemeat.
These people too
obeyed the cat, for he looked like he could have his threat carried out. When the royal carriage reached the meadow, the workers informed the king that the land belonged to the Marquis of Carabas. Hurrying ahead, Puss in Boots finally reached a great castle in the forest. A terrible ogre owned the castle. The ogre could change his shape at will and assume the form of other living things. If he chose, he could even turn himself into a handsome prince. But the ogre enjoyed being mean and frightening. From outside the castle gates, Puss in Boots shouted at the top of his voice.
Meow! Hello there! I have a message for the owner of this castle! Meow!
Go away, cat!
Shouted the ogre from behind the gates.
Meow, listen!
Shouted Puss in Boots.
It's really important!
Now after a long moment, while Puss held his breath, the gates opened. When he was in the presence of the ogre, Puss in Boots said,
Meow, I heard so much about you that I had to pay you a visit.
Cut the small talk! What do you want from me?
Snapped the ogre. Puss said,
Meow, I cannot believe the things I hear are true. Surely you cannot change yourself into a lion?
Asked Puss in Boots.
Oh, can't I? I'll show you,
Said the ogre. And he promptly changed himself into a lion to prove that he could do it. Puss in Boots ran up the curtain in fright and clung there until the ogre changed back again.
Meow! Bravo! How simply marvelous! You transform yourself into a huge lion in a flash. Meow. But can you turn yourself into something small?
Of course I can.
Snapped the ogre.
I don't believe, meow, you could turn yourself into a mouse?
Scoffed Puss in Boots.
I'll show you then!
Roared the ogre. And in an instant, he changed into a little mouse. In a flash, Puss in Boots pounced on him and gobbled him up. He then heard the sounds of the royal coach approaching the castle, so he ran to the gates and across the drawbridge.
Meow! Welcome to the castle of the Marquis of Carabas, Your Majesty. Meow!
The king was most impressed with the great castle the Marquis owned. When the Marquis declared he wanted the hand of the princess in marriage, the king had no objections, which suited her just fine, as she had fallen in love with a young man at first sight. The miller's son was so grateful to clever Puss in Boots that he declared that ever after, Puss was to be given royal treatment. The freshest fish in the kingdom were provided for the cat's meals, and a special scratching tree was set aside for him. He never had to catch another mouse to eat. He only played with them to amuse himself when he was bored. A happy ending for both master and cat.
Meow!
This story is taken from the French famous tale by Charles Perrault titled Le Petit Chaperon Rouge. In other words, Little Red Riding Hood.
Once upon a time, just at the edge of the forest lived a little country girl. She was very pretty, and her mother was so fond of her that she made this little girl a red hooded dress. It suited the girl so well that everybody called her Little Red Riding Hood. Her mother decided to bake a cake one day and told her to take it over to her grandmother's house, which was at the other end of the forest in another village. Little Red Riding Hood was thrilled as she wasn't allowed to wander off into the forest alone, but this was the day that she could. So Little Red Riding Hood set out immediately to go to her grandmother. As she was going through the forest, she stopped to pick some wild flowers.
Red, white, yellow, and blue. These flowers will make Grandma very happy,
she said to herself. While she was picking the flowers, little did she know that she was being watched by a hungry wolf. The wolf wanted to eat her up, but he didn't dare to because of some woodcutters working nearby in the forest. So instead, he asked her where she was going. Little Red Riding Hood, who did not know that it was dangerous to talk to a wolf, said to him,
I'm going to see my grandmother and give this cake my mother baked. I've also got some apples and oranges. I could spare some fruit if you want some.
No, thank you. I'm allergic to cake, and my tummy can't quite take fruit. But tell me, little girl that's dressed up in red, does your grandmother live far off?
Said the wolf.
It's the first house beyond the mill at the other end of the forest,
replied Red Riding Hood.
I see,
said the wolf.
I hope you get there safe and sound. As you can tell, there are some woodcutters ahead. Just be careful that the timber does not get in your way. It's best you make your way around it,
pointing to the left of the woodcutters.
I'll see you another day, and send my regards to your grandmother.
And with that, the wolf ran off. He ran off, taking the shortest direction to Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother's house. Little Red Riding Hood continued gathering flowers, running after butterflies, and she also stopped to talk to one of the woodcutters whom she recognized as her father's friend. Meanwhile, the wolf arrived at the Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother's house. It was exactly where Little Red Riding Hood had described, the first house beyond the mill at the other end of the forest. He knocked 3 times at the door.
Who's there?
Cried a faint old lady's voice.
Your grandchild, Little Red Riding Hood,
replied the wolf.
Mother sent me with a picnic basket of cakes and fruits.
Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother, who was somewhat ill and in bed, cried out,
Pull the latch downwards, dear, and the door will open.
The wolf pulled the latch down and the door opened. Then he immediately ran in and jumped on the bed. He was on top of her with his big teeth inches away from her face. The old lady was too shocked to scream or to do anything. She just lay there, staring, and tears just rolled down her eyes.
Oh, don't cry now, little old lady. I'm not going to eat you up. It's not you I'm interested in,
growled the wolf.
Although I have been without food for 3 days, I can wait a little longer for someone who looks more delicious.
With that, he shoved the old lady into an old cupboard and locked her up.
Let me out of here at once,
cried the old lady from inside the cupboard, but her voice was too faint for anybody outside the house to hear.
Quiet, old woman. One more word from you, and you'll be inside my tummy instead of being in the cupboard.
The old lady kept quiet, fearing for her life. A few moments later, there was a knock on the door.
Who's there?
Said the wolf, trying real hard to disguise his voice like the old lady's. Little Red Riding Hood, hearing the big voice of the wolf, was at first afraid, but thought to herself,
Grandma could be ill, and that was why her voice was hoarse.
So she answered,
It is I, Grandma, Little Red Riding Hood. I have brought you a cake which Mother baked, and some fruits too. May I come in, please?
Little Red Riding Hood was always polite.
The wolf cried out to her, clearing his throat. Pull the latch down, and the door will open, my dear.
Little Red Riding Hood did as she was told, and the door opened. The wolf, seeing her come in, hid himself under the blankets and said to her,
Put the cake and the fruits on the table beside me and come sit next to me.
She did as she was told and was amazed to see how her grandmother looked in her night clothes. She said to her,
Grandma, what big arms you have.
All the better to hug you, my dear.
The wolf gave her a big hug, his ears rubbing against hers.
Grandma, what big ears you have.
All the better to hear you, my child.
And your eyes, they're so big.
All the better to see you with, my child.
Grandma, and your teeth, they're so big.
All the better to eat you upward.
And with that, the wolf jumped out of the bed and chased her around the room. Little Red Riding Hood screamed as loud as she could, and just before the wolf could get to her, an axe came flying across the room, nipping the wolf's ear. The wolf turned around to see where the axe had come from, and he saw woodcutters at the door with axes bigger than the one that nipped his ear. He howled and jumped out of the window, running as fast as he could into the forest. The wolf was never to be seen again. Grandma was saved, and so was Little Red Riding Hood, who learned a lesson from this, which is never talk to strangers, especially sweet-talking wolves that seem to be charming, because these are the most dangerous of all. Once upon a time, there was a prince who wanted to marry a princess because recently his sister got married to the Marquis of Carabas. He saw how the whole town celebrated, and he said to himself,
If my sister can marry the Marquis of Carabas, then I must marry a princess, a real princess.
He traveled all around his father's kingdom, even beyond the forest over to the other side, where the legendary Beanstalk grew, just to find a princess. But nowhere could he get what he wanted. There were princesses enough. Some were pretty, some were not, but it was difficult to find out whether they were real ones. There was always something about them that he doubted. So he came home sad, for he would have liked very much to have a real princess for his bride. One evening, there was a terrible storm. Through the thunder and the pitter-patter of the rain, a knocking at the palace gate was heard. The king's men went to open it. There, standing in the rain, drenched in her red hooded dress, stood a lady. What a sight she was, with her hair wet falling at her face. But yet she said she was a princess, a real princess.
Well, we'll soon find that out,
thought the queen, when she found out that there was yet another lady pretending to be a princess. The queen said nothing more and went into the bedroom. She took all the bedding off the bedstead and laid a pea at the bottom. Then she took 20 mattresses and laid them on the pea. The bed towered in the room and was nearly touching the ceiling, but wasn't. There was enough space between the last mattress and the ceiling for someone to lie down or sit up. The queen ordered the lady who claimed to be a princess to change into a nightgown. Somehow the princess chose a red-colored nightgown over all the other beige and white ones, and now that she was all cleaned up, she looked very pretty. The king and prince were a little confused about what was going on, but they dared not ask the queen. "On the mattresses must the princess lie down all night," said the queen, and she went to bed without saying another word. The king said to his son, "I hope your mother knows what she's doing." And with that, he said good night and went to bed as well. When morning came, the princess was asked how she had slept. "Oh, very badly," said the princess. "I could hardly close my eyes. I tossed and turned and tossed and turned. Heaven only knows what was in the bed. As I was lying down on something hard. Look, I am black and blue all over my body. It's horrible." Only now did the king and prince know what was going on. They knew that she was a real princess because she had felt the pea right through the 20 mattresses, because nobody but a real princess could be as sensitive as that. They agreed amongst themselves that she was indeed of royal blood. The queen, of course, said, "Mother knows best." With the blessing of the king and queen, the prince took the lady for his wife, for now he knew that he had a real princess. The people in the whole kingdom were invited to the wedding. The pea was put in a museum, where it may still be seen, if no one has stolen or eaten it, that is.
Once upon a time, there was an old sow with 3 little pigs. She loved them very much, and looking at them, she thought to herself that they've grown up and they must leave the sty. So she sent them out to settle in their own place. They were told not to live with each other, but they could, however, stay close by. The 3 pigs went off in search of their new homes. The first pig met a man with a bundle of straw, and the pig said to him,
"Excuse me, sir. Could I buy that straw? I need to build a house with it."
The man handed him the straw, and the little pig built a house with it. The second pig saw a man with a cart full of wood.
"Excuse me, sir. Could I buy some wood off you? I'd like to build a house."
The man sold him the wood, and the second pig built his house out of it. The third pig met a bricklayer and asked him if he could buy some bricks off him. The bricklayer sold him some bricks, and the third pig made his house out of the bricks. The 3 little pigs' houses were not far apart from each other. They would spend time rolling in the mud together, but when it was time to retire, they would go back into their homes, which they proudly built. One day, a wolf came along. It had just come out of the forest as it was chased away by some woodcutters. It was very hungry. The wolf saw that there were 3 houses built quite near of each other. One made of straw, the other of wood, and the last one of brick. He went and knocked at the door of the house that was made of straw. In fact, there was nothing to knock on, so he shook the straw that was held together that made up the door and shouted,
little pig, let me come in."
To which the pig answered,
"No, no, by the hair of my chinny chin chin."
The wolf then answered,
"Look, if you don't open the door, I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in, and then I'll eat you up."
So he huffed and he puffed and he blew the house in. The little pig ran for his life. The nearest house was his brother's, which was made of wood. He knocked on the door frantically.
"Let me in, brother!"
The door opened just in time for the little pig to get in. The wolf made a leap and landed with a bump on his head after hitting the closed door.
2 pigs! I'm sure I could eat both of them. Little pigs, let me come in."
"No, no, by the hair of my chinny chin chin,"
said both the pigs in unison.
"I've got a lot of air in my empty tummy, so I'll puff and I'll huff, and I'll blow your house in.
So he huffed, and he puffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, and at last he blew the house down. The pigs ran for their lives to their brother's house that was made of bricks.
Brother, let us in, please! Hurry, the wolf is gaining on us!
Said the two little pigs. They were lucky that the wolf had run out of breath as he was slow to chase after them. The three little pigs locked the front door as fast as they could. When the wolf reached the brick house, he said,
Little pigs, let me come in.
No, by the hair of my chin,
said the three little pigs.
3 little pigs, huh?
The wolf thought to himself loudly,
This is my lucky day. Look, little pigs, if you don't let me in, I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in like I did the other 2. I'm getting good at this, you know.
The wolf huffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, and he puffed, and he puffed, and huffed, but he could not get the house down. When he found out that he could not, with all his huffing and puffing, blow the house down, he said,
Little pigs, listen, I'm sure we can be friends and live together. I know where there's a nice field of wheat and grain.
Where?
Said one of the little pigs.
Oh, it's somewhere between the castle of the ogre and the king's palace, not too far away from the miller's house. If you'll be ready tomorrow, I'll come by again, and we'll go together and get some breakfast.
Very well,
said the little pig that owned the brick house, as the other 2 were still too afraid to talk.
I'll be ready. When will you be here?
Oh, when the sun starts to rise.
Well, the little pig got up before sunrise and got the grain and wheat before the wolf came. When the wolf showed up at sunrise, he shouted out,
Little pig, or pigs, are you ready?
The little pig said,
Yes, I am. I've been to the place that you told me and got a nice pot full of breakfast. In fact, my brothers are all feasting right now.
The wolf felt very angry, but he thought that he would trick the little pig somehow or other, so he said,
Little pig, I know where there's a nice apple tree.
Where?
Said the pig.
Down near a house, by the big beanstalk tree.
Replied the wolf.
I want to be your friend, and if you will not go before me, I'll come for you. This time at noon, when the sun is at its highest, and we could get some apples.
But before noon, the little pig went off for the apples, hoping to get back before the wolf came. He was coming down from the tree when he saw the wolf coming, which frightened him very much. When the wolf came up, he said,
Little pig, what? You're here before me. How could you?
Oh, I just came ahead of you to make sure that there were no rotten apples,
said the little pig.
I'll throw one down to you.
And he threw it down so far that while the wolf had gone to pick it up, the little pig jumped down and ran home. Just before sunset, the wolf came again, and he shouted out,
Little pig, there is a fair at Jacqueline this evening. This is by the king's palace. Would you and your brothers like to go?
Oh, yes,
said the pig.
We'll go. When shall we be ready?
Just before sunset,
said the wolf. The little pig went off before the wolf showed up as usual, and this time with his 2 brothers. They got to the fair, and they bought a butter churn. While they were on their way home, they saw the wolf coming. The 2 younger pigs started to panic.
What shall we do?
They cried.
The wolf will surely eat us up this time.
The 3rd pig, which was the eldest and the smartest of them all, said calmly,
Get into the churn and hide.
The 3 then jumped into the churn, and by doing it turned it around, and it rolled down the hill with the pigs in it. That frightened the wolf so much that he ran off without going to the fair. At sunset, he went to the pig's house and told them how frightened he'd been by a great round thing which came down the hill past him. Then the little pig said,
Ha! We frightened you then. We'd been to the fair and bought a butter churn. And when we saw you, we got into it and rolled down the hill.
The wolf was very angry now, and he howled.
Look, piggies, I'm going to climb over the roof and jump in through the chimney into your house, and then I'll feast on all 3 of you.
When the little pigs saw what he was doing, they hung a pot full of water and made up a blazing fire where the chimney was. When the wolf was coming down, they took off the cover, and in fell the wolf. The water was so hot that the wolf jumped out of it and ran out the door, which was left open by one of the little pigs.
Don't you come back again, you nasty wolf! 'Cause if you do, we'll make sure you'll get cooked the next time.
The wolf was never to be seen again. The three little pigs? Well, they stayed together for a while.